Well, hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We're getting ready to record Mike in the Midwest. It's a hot one. So that's what we're talking about today, the heat wave. Check my levels and we'll get started. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, check, check. Looks good. All right, let's do this thing. We're already up to episode 102. All right, let's podcast. Let's mini podcast. Here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 102 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. My name is Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast, but you know that because you're a patron and a super fan of the show. So we don't need to go over all that, but I just want to say happy Tuesday to you. We're recording today's show on Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Happy Flag Day to you. Hopefully you have your flag flying in the front of your house or apartment or whatever dwelling you live in. It is Flag Day. And I saw a fun stat today tweeted by Phil Kogan, the host of The Amazing Race, that our current flag in the United States is the only version of our flag that has been true and has stayed constant for more than 50 years. So how about that? Because the flag was constantly changing with the changes in our country with states and colonies and territories and stuff like that. So pretty cool to know that this is the old reliable one, over 50 years for this version, and who knows how much longer this one will stay what it is. I think it looks pretty cool, and we do fly a flag on the front of our house proudly 24/7 with a light shining on it so it can stay on display all the time. We actually just replaced it with a newer, bigger version just the past week, and it flaps out there every morning. I take Riley out first thing in the morning to do her business. As she gets up, and that thing, if it's a windy morning, that thing whaps you right there as you walk out our front door because it's a big flag. I mean, they could use it at Busch Stadium, I think. But I'm a guy, right? I don't want to have a small flag. I want to have a big flag. So we have one at our house. If you ever drive by here in St. Peters, Missouri, and you come down our cul-de-sac, you will know our house because it's got the big flag and the Jeep in the garage. So anyway, hope you are doing well here in mid-June. We are going to be talking about a couple of fun topics. The main topic here in about 15 minutes will be this heat wave that we're having in most parts of the country. Man, is it hot. And we're going to talk about how we used to try to beat the heat back in the day and how good we have it now. You don't think about it. We have it so good right now. And I think we got to think about that with a lot of things. I mean, just like this show, just like podcasting, just like having I hate to say a car phone like Carousel of Progress, but a cell phone, the actual ability to communicate anywhere in the world at any time, to get information anytime, anywhere. We are living in the good old days. I know it's not perfect right now. There's a lot of stuff to complain about. However, the technology we have, the ability we have to be comfortable is unmatched compared to just in my lifetime. The differences, to what we used to go through. So we're going to talk about how we used to beat the heat or tried to beat the heat because we didn't do very well when I was a kid. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But what's going on here? We always start off with what's going on here at the Be Our Guest Podcast Studios since we last talked. So we did the show last week on Tuesday, just like we're doing this week. We did that intentionally because you guys are Disney fans. You figured it out, right? Last Wednesday was release day for the 2023 Walt Disney World Vacation packages. So I have been extremely busy since Wednesday morning, and I want to thank everybody for their support over at the Magic for Less. I know many of our patrons reach out and book many trips with us at the Magic for Less. I get to help you, and I sincerely thank you for that. That's what I do full time. It's not a hobby. It's how I support my family. And that means the world to me that you trust me with your trips. And I know that you guys are Disney experts. I mean, I don't, I understand. I know some people may have like some kind of, I don't know, ego to think that if you're a travel agent, you know better than the regular Disney fan. I know that you guys probably keep up just as much, if not more than I do. You're a Disney fan. You could do this stuff on your own. I get that, but you reach out. And by booking with the Magic for Less, you support a small business here in America. You help support our family. You help keep the engine going here in our country. And I appreciate that very much. So thank you to everybody who reached out. It has been a crazy time. Trisha, I know Trisha's out there listening to the Patreon podcast up in Wisconsin. She cracks me up because she was so ready to go, so ready to go. And I was so ready to get her a quote, but she wants to go for next Christmas season. We can't book Christmas quite yet. We're close today as of the, sorry, I get a swig here. So Trisha, she's up in Wisconsin, and it's so funny because I know she's listening to the show today, but she's looking to book that trip for Christmas of 2023, and I'm excited to help her out. I've helped her out on many other trips, but we can't reach it quite yet because of the 499 rule. We can only book trips 499 days from today, and as of this recording, that would be October 27th, 2023, I believe, is what today is. And the trick is just ask your digital assistant, just yell out, what date is 499 days from today? That's what I do every day so that I can see. And your checkout date has to be within that window. So not your check-in day, but your checkout date. So there's your Black Diamond travel agent tip for the day here on Mike in the Midwest. But that's what I've been doing really since then. We did celebrate our 16th wedding anniversary on Friday. So that was kind of fun, right in the middle of the madness. My wife and I, instead of going to our typical Mexican restaurant on Friday night called El Azteca, it's funny because we go to a restaurant here in St. Peter. Actually, it's in O'Fallon. It's in the next town over, about 5 minutes down the road. We go to a place called El Azteca. And, hashtag Scotty G, his favorite place up in East Lansing, Michigan, is called El Azteco. How crazy is that? We go to almost the same place. Mine is female, El Azteca. La Azteca, I guess it is, and his is El Azteco. So yeah, we go kind of to a restaurant just randomly, but they have the same name almost. So anyway, instead of going to our typical place, we went to the fancy Mexican restaurant, which is called Rosalita's, and it was very, very good. But of course, if you go, so when I go to a Mexican restaurant, I always get the combo platter, right? Because I want to get a lot of food. I always have to have rice and beans. I got to get something that comes with rice and beans. I love rice and beans at a Mexican restaurant. And then I always want to have, a couple of different things. So I usually go for like a 3 combo platter, something like a burrito, a taco, an enchilada, maybe a tostada. I'll switch it up sometimes with a tamale, something like it. It depends on my mood. But this restaurant did not have a combo option because it's fancy. So they had this the burrito, and it just said like a burrito, but it said it had all the stuff like rice and beans and salsa and pico de gallo and all that stuff. I was like, okay. But I was worried like I was going to be hungry because it just, you only got one burrito. You didn't get 3 things. They brought this thing out. And let me just tell you, it was like a fire hose. This thing was huge. I mean, I had to work hard to finish this thing. And I can eat a lot because, obviously I burn a lot of calories by running every day. And but it was so good. So if you're ever in St. Louis and you want to go to a nice Mexican restaurant, you can ask Scotty G. When he came to town for Memorial Day weekend a couple of years back, we spent some time on the patio at Rosalita's. It's good. It's at the corner of Manchester and 270 in West St. Louis County. So come on down. It's very, very good. So we did that on Friday. Had a good time with that. Other than that, just kind of hanging out. Mallory's getting ready for high school cheer. Her all-star cheer has started up as well, so there's practicing for that already. So we're getting already practicing for the summit down at Walt Disney World next May. So the climb, as they call it, has started with that. We're at the very bottom of the climb, I guess you could say, because this is kind of like 2-a-days at this point. It's the gym that they practice in here in St. Louis. It's funny because their gym is not air conditioned, so during this heat wave, it's hot at their practices because their gym is basically, it's in an industrial park, and the building is just it's within a bunch of buildings that are just warehouses. So next to it is a warehouse that you see a bunch of like big trucks just dropping off loads, and on the other side the exact same thing. It's a bunch of warehouses where big trucks, 18 wheelers, and so forth, just kind of drop off their loads and warehouse things. But they rent this building right there. That's just a big aluminum building that is not air conditioned, but it's their gym. They have their mats and all their stuff to practice. So this time of year is a struggle, but it makes them tougher athletes, I think, because It's like football players in two-a-days in August. You got to earn it. So they're working hard. So they earn that trip to Summit when it comes around in May. So this is the time you put in the work to get better for the performances this winter. So they are doing that. What else? I forgot to tell you. You probably saw this on my Instagram. We had an air show here in St. Louis, right next to my house. Here we had it's called the Spirit of St. Louis Fair and Air Show, which was about 5 miles from our house at an executive airport right close to us. Not Lambert Airport. If you ever fly into St. Louis, you will not fly to this airport. It's a small executive airport where the private jets come in. The big wigs that come in on like the 20-seat private fancy jets, they land here. So we had an air show out there, and we live close enough that we got to see all the planes fly during the air show from our deck, just watching from the backyard. So if you saw my Instagram, we got to watch the U.S. Navy Blue Angels were here. So they did practice runs on Thursday and Friday. Saturday and Sunday were their performances or their demonstrations, they call them. And then we got to see an F-35, and that thing buzzed the house on Saturday. And I mean, it came directly over our house, low and fast. And I thought it was going to, I seriously wasn't sure if it was going to come through my kitchen because we heard it coming, and it just kept getting louder and louder and real quick. And then we saw right over our lake. And I mean, that thing scared us to death. So I'm an aviation nut. I love watching planes. And I was geeking out all weekend because these air shows would start at 11:30 in the morning and they wouldn't complete until 4 o'clock. So you had planes in the air for, 4 hours. Not constantly, but you had, stunt planes, the little, biplanes, and just all kinds of stuff, parachutists, helicopters. It was just awesome. So that was kind of fun to be able to just hang out at home and look up in the sky and see all these amazing, amazing jets. Remember, I used to not fly. I used to still love watching planes, but I used to not fly. Now I love flying. Can't wait to fly to Disneyland. Less than 3 weeks. It's going to be soon. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to show you guys Disneyland. It's going to be so fun and give my thoughts. So anyway, that's kind of what we've been doing between here and there. Just a lot of Walt Disney World quotes, working with guests over there, watching airplanes in the sky, and Mallory's getting ready for cheer. That's what we're doing. So let's get to the feedback on last week's show. Now, last week's show was kind of interesting because I always try to make the podcast about things that are happening here in my part of the Midwest right now. And I was curious because, we call it cutting the grass. When I was a kid, it's time to cut the grass. That's what we always said. But I've heard people call it mowing the lawn. And then I've heard people on Twitter talk about how they have never done that as an adult because they've lived in New York City or they've lived in places where they've just never had a lawn. And so they're 50 years old. They've never, ever used a lawnmower. And that just boggles my mind because as a kid, like as a 7 or 8-year-old, that was like one of the steps to just like that. You were dying to like get behind the Toro. Grandpa's Toro was a brand of lawnmower, like a cheap one, I guess. But you just wanted to be able to cut the grass, and you're always trying to make the perfect lines with a push mower. And that was just kind of something you did. Like once April hit, you were cutting the grass once a week until, maybe September or October here in St. Louis. And that was just kind of a ritual. That's just kind of the part of summer. So I wanted to know like how people did this around the country and around the world. I got quite a bit of feedback here. So Dennis, my good buddy down in Texas, says for him, it has always been mowing the lawn. I remember my first year as a homeowner in Texas being surprised that the grass needed mowing in February. It was cool mowing my own grass, but I was so over it by July when it was 100 degrees outside. Sometimes the lawn only needs to be mowed every 2 weeks if we're having a drought and the weather is excessively hot. Otherwise, it's every week. All right, Dennis. And Dennis is a transplant from here in St. Louis area down in Texas. So yeah, mowing in February, that's a little early. That's spring training time right there. So yeah, we try to hold off as long as we can for that first mow because once you're in on the first mow, you're good until the fall. And then in the fall, like by September, you kind of don't care what your grass looks like because the leaves are falling and stuff. So you're kind of like, eh. But the thing is, here you want to get that last mow in because then when the snow falls, if you're in a place where you're going to get a good snowfall, you want the snow to stick and to look really pretty for the pictures. So you don't want to have a lot of tall, sprigs of grass popping up through the snow. You got to think about these things when you're here in the Midwest. So Dennis, thanks for being a patron. I appreciate you very much. Madison is here. Madison, thank you for being a patron and being here. Says, hey, Mike, my wife and I live in Dallas, Georgia, a little northwest of Atlanta. When I'm out doing the lawn, I call it work since I do landscaping for a living. Oh my gosh. I hope you're staying cool in this weather. Please, please stay cool. I can't imagine. I've always found it funny when you say on the main show about listening while cutting the grass, since while I'm listening, that's what I'm doing 95% of the time. We start cutting the grass around March, depending on when the weather starts getting warm, and normally cut all the way around through October. I work for a small company, it's just my boss and myself, and we cut about 200 houses every week, along with a few churches in the area. We use the big zero turn mowers, but we still have a few yards that we cut with push mowers. Summers are definitely long and hot, but it's always easier when I get to listen to the podcast and get a mental break to escape to Disney. As always, thank you so much for all you do. Zach Samples. Like, is that Zach? Okay, good. He says using his wife's account to post this. She does not cut the grass. He says she could at least cut the grass at your house, right? That's what you do for a living. You don't want to come home and have to, cut the grass after you cut everybody else's grass. All right, Zach, thank you so much. And please do stay cool. That's awesome. Let me tell you a funny story about that real quick, Zach. So at our old house, we had neighbors across the street that we just grew up with. Like Paige was friends with Jordan, which was their kid. And they were, so it was Karen and Larry were the couple, and they had kids that were the same age as Paige and Mallory and stuff. And so we were all summer all together all the time because on our street, everybody just played together at our old house because Karen was a teacher, Pam and I were teachers, and they had a swimming pool in their backyard. So, we were teachers. We didn't have a lot of money over the summer. So we just hang out in our front yards and play kickball with all the kids, and we'd swim in their pool, and we're just hanging out all the time. Well, anyway, her husband, Larry, that's what he did for a living. He worked for a lawn cutting business. So he would get up early in the morning, go cut all this grass, and he always had the best lawn on our street. And he was great at landscaping. Like he had ponds in his backyard with like koi fish and waterfalls. It was awesome. I do miss seeing all his stuff at our new house. But here's the thing. He was so proud because I remember the night he got one of those zero turn riding lawnmowers where you sit on it and it's got the two levers like on the right and left instead of a steering wheel. It's got, you sit on it, you sit like in a chair, kind of like an office chair, and the two handles come up like from your left and your right, if you can kind of picture that. And so you have these two sticks here, and that's how you steer the thing. So he's like, "You want to ride it? You want to you want to try to give it a go?" So I had never been on one of these things before. So he's we were out there messing around like on a Friday night after he got done working. And so he got it off the trailer and brings it over to across the street to our house. And I got on it. And so if you just push both sticks forward, it goes like super fast forward. You push them backwards, it goes backwards, left, right, it's crazy. It's like kind of like a carnival ride or something. I mean, it was crazy. I was flying all over the place. I almost hit a tree. Now, good news, he didn't have me turn on the blades. There were no blades going because I'd have destroyed our yard at this point. But I was all over the place. I couldn't get the hang of that thing. Like he's like, "Get off that thing. You're gonna wreck it. You're gonna hit your house. You're gonna kill a kid," because we had like 5 kids there. But it was one of those things like the thing was I was laughing so hard because I was not expecting, and I know it's probably not fun for you, Zach, because it's like work. Like people say, "Oh, it must be so fun listening to Disney music on hold." Well, it was for the first couple of days. 10 years later, it's not so much fun listening to the same 10 songs all the time. So I mean, I'm sure you're not having a good, I'm sure you don't think it's like a go-kart anymore. But when I was on it for that very first time, man, it was so crazy. It was, what it felt like is alien swirling saucers at in Toy Story Land at Hollywood Studios. Man, I was all over the place. It was crazy, but yeah, nobody knew where I was going. So there's a quick story for you, Zach. You do not want me on your equipment. Keep me away. All right, Trisha. I was just talking about Trisha Hellwig up in Wisconsin. Confession. She says, "I've never mowed." So I had to ask my husband. His answer was both. Future tense, I need to mow the lawn. Past tense, I cut the grass. To be fair, he's never scrubbed a toilet. That's how we divide the household chores. There you go. My wife says divide and conquer. That's it. That's perfect. And I never thought about it. Future tense, past tense. I need to mow the lawn or I cut the grass. I'm going to start using that. Stolen. Thanks, Trisha. Tell your husband. Carrie Good says, "Well, I may need that Cardinals hat after the way the Cubs have been playing." Yikes. Well, our Cardinals are in first place now. So welcome to the band. Jump on the bandwagon with us. We're doing well right now. Today we're having a doubleheader against the Pirates. We just finished the first game. We won that one, and second game tonight at 6:10. So we'd love to have you. I have plenty of Cardinals hats, and I will give them out gladly to folks that want to give up a Cubs hat. That's great. And finally, David Z says, "Great podcast. Growing up, I used to help my grandparents mow their lawn with a riding lawnmower. Thought it was the best thing ever. That is exactly right. That is, man, that is a story of my life right there. Several years later, after they passed away, I inherited their mower and used it at my house. It was a peaceful hour to myself on the Sears Craftsman. Oh my gosh, that was the kind of lawnmower my grandpa had. It was a Craftsman riding lawnmower. That's exactly the kind that I used to drag the baseball field at my at our house we built in middle school in the field behind our house. I took a little piece of fence, dragged it behind the Sears Craftsman. It was silver. I remember the silver lawnmower and tried to make an infield. Now that we have moved from Chicago down to Tampa, my lawn is a lot smaller and the temps are a lot higher. So I no longer need it, but I miss that time. That's exactly right. I mean, when you're that age, you just want something with a motor and wheels and you are good to go. But it's funny how you can think about, like, I follow some Twitter accounts and you got to kind of dig deep to find them. And a lot of times I find them because other accounts retweet stuff. But today there was an account that was retweeting pages out of the 1984 Sears Wish Book. And it's funny, you see this one thing. So, like, if I saw a picture of that Sears Craftsman riding lawnmower from back in, 1983, that my grandpa, I mean, when I picture my grandpa, I picture him sitting on that thing. Like, I could tell you what the front of it looked like with the headlights and what the stickers looked like. They were kind of orange and yellow on the side. 'Cause I mean, I would see him at home cutting the lawn with it. I would see him down at church all the time riding around, and my grandpa was always smiling when he was on. My grandpa loved physical labor. He loved cutting the grass. He loved making our church look nice for Sunday. He was always there on Friday and Saturday to make it look good on Sunday. So everybody was happy. Everything looked great. I mean, that was what my grandpa liked doing. And the funny thing is you don't realize this at the time, but that's how you remember him. Like when I think about grandpa now in 2022, he passed away in 2001. Over 20 years later, when I think of grandpa, I think of him sitting on that Sears Craftsman smiling. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So anyway, let's get to today's topic, which is it's so hot right now. It is so hot. Yesterday, we broke a record here in St. Louis. We hit 100 degrees. Last night when we went to bed, and I went to bed at like 10:40, which is kind of late for me. I looked at the temperature and the heat index was 101 when I went to sleep. The heat index was over 100 degrees when I went to sleep last night. There's something wrong with that. That is too hot for 10:40 p.m. Right now, as I'm looking down at my taskbar, it is 98 degrees outside. I don't know what the heat index is right now, but I know last time I checked, it was 109. And it is just, we're going to break records, they say, for the next 5 days. I mean, it is just a heat wave, and it's early for it to be this hot. Of course, the Cardinals are playing a doubleheader today, which is crazy with this kind of heat, but they're getting paid okay. They're going to do fine. And we won the first game, so tonight's just bonus if we win that one too. But I thought, I was thinking about this, that on days like today, we try to go for walks in the afternoon and stuff. And so this afternoon, instead of walking around our lake like we usually do, I took my iPad out and I watched the Cardinals game and I walked 4 laps on the treadmill instead of walking around the lake. And I got to take Riley out to do her business, but we went out and we're back in 5 minutes. We took care of that and we were out. But back in the day, and so right now what we have is we can stay in the air conditioning almost all the time, and it feels good in this house. And I have the Be Our Guest podcast studios are down in the basement of our house where it's always a cool, constant temperature here because of the computers and all the equipment. We just have it so good because when I think back in the day, I was trying to think of the ways we tried to beat the heat. Because I mean, it had to have been this hot almost, back in the 80s when I grew up in St. Louis. And I just remember, a few stories, and I might have shared these on the podcast. I know I have, or here on Mike in the Midwest, but I just remember growing up, we did not have air conditioning in our house, in our first house as a kid. We had an attic fan, which I don't know if you know what an attic fan is, but it's this loud fan that was in the hallway of our house. Like it was cut into the ceiling. And that was, so you would turn this thing on. It was like a jet engine. It was, just rah, 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 rah. And so what it did, it sucked air through all the windows in the entire house. And so that was basically the air conditioner that we had. And most people in our neighborhood just had attic fans. And again, in St. Louis, you got to understand, it does get to 100 degrees every summer. But in the wintertime in St. Louis, here's the bonus. We'll get to 10 below in the wintertime. Wind chills, sometimes 30 below. So we get the best of both worlds. We get record-setting cold, record-setting hot. It's crazy how extreme we get here. So anyway, we have this attic fan, and that's what we'd use to stay cool. But the thing is, when it gets this hot, So when the heat index is 101, it's pulling in that air. Like that's your air conditioning. It's pulling in that hot air. And that's the only thing is trying to keep you cool. So I do remember one Sunday morning as a kid, we woke up and, I think we woke up because on Sunday mornings we went to church. And so I remember my mom getting us up, or I got up first and my mom got up or something. We couldn't find my dad because my dad played in a band on Friday and Saturday nights at the local steakhouse. He's a drummer. And so we got up and my dad wasn't in bed. He wasn't like, and he was nowhere to be found. We couldn't find him. And this was like, it was a hot night. It was like in July. I just remember it was like in the dead of summer. We couldn't find him. Well, come to find out, my dad got so hot that he was sleeping out on our patio in our backyard on the Chase Lounge thing, like the plastic, lawn furniture, because it was just so hot. He's like, I can't be in the house. And he fell asleep out there because it was so smoking hot. So that was one way we beat the heat back in the day. Now, I do remember that across the street, I've talked about Ryan many times, my buddy growing up across the street, his grandparents, where he spent most of his time, they got central air when we were kids. Now, before that, now this is when we thought we were rich, right? We got a window AC unit that we mounted in our kitchen. I guess, and I don't remember there being a window there prior to this. So maybe we cut a hole in the kitchen wall. I don't know. But we mounted that window unit. And I just remember that we would all just hang out by that thing and just, this time of year and just be like, oh, because it would blow on you. And those things are pretty nice because when I taught actually in my last classroom, the building was so old that we didn't have central air at my old school, but all of our classrooms had those window AC units. And I loved it because nobody bugged me about the temperature of my room. I could get that. My room was like a meat locker because that thing was big and I could get that room cold. And so those things are great, but they're not great for an entire house, but they're great for like a room. But I just remember we thought we were living large because instead of having the attic fan on, we would turn on the air conditioning unit, which was in our kitchen. But again, that didn't do much good for it was a 2-bedroom house, and the bedrooms were on the other end of the house, which our house was less than 1,000 square feet. It was super small, but still it didn't fill the whole house very well. But still, when you were cold or hot, you would just go down to the kitchen and hang out there and cool off. So that we thought we were living large. But then Ryan's grandparents got something I'd never heard of as a kid, central air. I just remember some vans came, with all the equipment and stuff, and they put in, wires and tubes and all that stuff. And all of a sudden he had air conditioning in every room of the house, equally distributed. It was like a miracle. Like no one had ever seen it in a house, like at least in our neighborhood. And I just remember like we would go in his room, because he had like a room that his grandparents, like it was a guest room where all his toys were, and we'd play. Like, and it was cool. We'd go in the living room, it was cool. We go in the kitchen, cool. It was crazy. Like that's first I remember that the first time I had seen central air conditioning. So that was something. And then eventually we did get central air right before we got to put in right before we sold that house and built our house in 7th grade, before we moved. And then of course our new house in 7th grade had central air, and that was the greatest. So that was kind of the thing. But so back in the day, I just remember like, when it was super hot, we would get treats. So we got flavor ices. Do you remember those? So I think we've talked about those here on the show. They were like basically frozen Kool-Aid in big rectangular uh like plastic containers there. You buy like 100 in a red net. They would come in like a red net or like a cardboard box. Their flavor ice are like orange flavored, red, purple, green. And we would just tear those things up. They were dirt cheap. They still are. You can get them like at Walmart or Target. You just throw them in the freezer, and then you take a pair of scissors, snip off the top there, and just basically you're eating frozen Kool-Aid. I would guess that's kind of the same, what it is. It's super cheap, but I mean, as a kid, that's a great way to cool down. You could eat 10 of those. And we would do that many, many times. That's one of the ways we beat the heat. Also, I remember when it was super hot, my mom would get us soda. But the thing is, I think I've talked about this here on the show too, but we would never get like Coke or Pepsi back in the day. In St. Louis, what you got Vess. Now, you might not know what Vess is, but you probably have an equivalent of Vess where you are listening to the show. So Vess, which is called the Billion Bubble Cola, here in St. Louis, it was our local bottler. It was our local soft drink creator. and it's very popular. I mean, at least it was very popular in the 80s, and they had a bunch of flavors. And what would happen is, instead of buying, like when you go to, like when I buy my Coke Zeros, I go to Target and I get a 12 pack in the box, and that's how you buy it. With Vest Cola, what you would do is you would go to the grocery store as a kid and you would buy it can by can. So just a regular soda can, but they had a bunch of flavors. They would have cream soda, they would have, lemon lime, they would have cola, they would have but it was all, this was like super, super cheap versions of all the regular sodas. So it wasn't 7 Up. It was Vest was like dirt cheap. It was like 10 cents a can. That's why we always got it. And we could drink it a lot in the summer. So it's, you would get this, lemon lime ripoff or this cola, because it was just called Vest Cola. It wasn't Pepsi or Coke. It was just Vest Cola. I forget, like Dr. Diablo or something. That was like Dr. Pepper. Cream soda. They had a purple soda. They said they probably had 20 different flavors. And what you would do is you would take like a cardboard box bottom and you would just fill it up with whatever flavors you wanted. They all cost exactly the same. And you would just get charged by the can. And then you would just take that and throw it in the fridge. And then, when you're playing in the summer, in between your activities, you might run in, every kid grabs a soda there and, kind of cools off there under the tree. Also, when we were really getting, fancy, we get RC Cola. Do you guys remember RC Cola in the blue can with the red RC? We used to drink that. My grandparents loved RC. We drank that at Steak and Shake. I think that's all they served, actually. I don't think they served Coke or Pepsi at Steak and Shake. So another thing that I remember as far as beating the heat, now we never had a pool growing up, but we had sprinklers. So we had the one. Now there's a lot of different kinds of sprinklers, right? For you to sprinkle your yard, to water the lawn, as we call it. We had the one that was like a fan. So you would put it there and it would shoot vertically like a big fan, and it would just kind of go back and forth, back and forth. And what we would always do is we just jump over it like that. That was fun. Like we would do that for, I guess, hours. I don't know. It'd be like, hey, you want to play in the sprinkler? Yeah. Okay, go get your trunks on. And we'd meet up at somebody's yard and we'd play on the sprinkler. So we'd do that to beat the heat. Another thing we did, again, my dad worked in construction. So he was a concrete worker. So sometimes, like if they would finish a job, like they would put in a patio or a driveway or some kind of concrete thing, at the end of the night, if it was going to rain the next day or there was a chance of rain, they would cover it up with clear plastic, like real thick clear plastic, so it didn't get ruined. And so my dad would have that sometimes around the house. Now, what we would do, of course, back in the day, one of the best things to get, you would see commercials for constantly, was a slip and slide. Now, those were awesome. They were yellow. They had like a spot where you would hook the hose and had those, nozzles that would shoot water at different places. It would squirt up. The slip and slide commercials were epic. And you always wanted the official Whammo slip and slide. Well, we didn't get that, but we did have plastic and we had a hose. So we made a homemade slip and slide many times at our house, and it worked pretty well. I mean, it wasn't bad because this plastic my dad had was super thick and it wasn't slick at first. But as it got wetter and wetter, and we'd always experiment. This was the scientist in us, right? We put, we'd put like, I don't know, Crisco, or we'd find anything, butter that we thought might be slick, and we put it on there a little bit and try to get slicker. And we eventually got it pretty slick, and we'd slip and slide. But again, that would just destroy the yard. It would put a rut like through the grass. So we'd have fun with our homemade slip and slides and sprinklers. And, back in the day, though, the thing is, it had to have been this hot, right? I mean, I don't think that getting hot in the summer like this is a brand new phenomenon. It might happen more often and it might be more intense, for some of the days, but it was still really, really hot. But looking back, I don't remember like it being anything that kept us inside, because we still rode bikes. I bet you we still rode bikes when it was 95, because we rode bikes every day in the summer. We did that. We played kickball in the backyard after dark every day with the lights in the backyard. It didn't matter if the heat index was, nobody told us what the heat index was because we didn't have social media. We didn't have phones. We didn't have that kind of information. We just knew it was hot and we were going to go chase lightning bugs and put them in a jar, in a Folgers jar. That's what we did. And did we get hot? Oh yeah, we got super hot. I mean, we played baseball. One of the things I remember too, we had a tournament. This was when I was in like, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And we were playing in a tournament in a city called Ellisville, which is actually out by Rosalita, as I was talking about earlier. And we just kept winning. And so that day, I think we ended up playing 3 or 4 different games, but you had to wait in between games like 3 or 4 hours to get to your next game. And I remember one day it was just super hot like this, and we didn't want to sit outside to wait for our next game because it was like from like 2 in the afternoon until like 6, and it was super hot. So I just remember we all went to a local mall that was back, it was called West County Mall, and back then it was super kind of abandoned. Nobody went there, with nobody, there were no shops that were popular at the time. And we just went there and like brought in some food and just kind of sat there and just enjoyed the air conditioner and hung out in the central part of the mall and just kind of waited it out and then drove back out to Ellisville to play our next game just so we could stay fresh, stay cool, and stay kind of in the area. But there were a lot of ways to beat to beat the heat. And those were kind of some of the ways we did it back in the day. But what about you? That's what I want to know. So maybe you're from a place that it gets hotter than St. Louis in the summer. Maybe you're in a place where it's not so extreme. But way back in the day, how did you beat the heat? What was unique? Did you make your own slip and slide? Did you make your own swimming pool? Did you have a pool pass? Did you go to a local place? What did you do? So let's talk about it here in the middle of summer. I would love to hear about that. Also, I wanted to send a huge happy Father's Day to all the Disney dads out there in our audience. I hope you have a great Father's Day on Sunday, and I appreciate you being a part of our podcast community. Thanks for all you do for your families. All right. So leave that feedback again, patreon.com/slash Be Our Guest podcast, this show or any show. I love hearing from you, and we'll share it on next week's podcast. So until we get together again next week, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon. Do, 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 do. Oh my gosh. Yeah, RC Cola rocked. And I have heard in Seattle that they don't have AC. One of the podcasts I listened to, the guy moved to Seattle, and he was talking about that. He did get an apartment that had it, a window unit, but he's like, he was shocked that that was a feature because he moved from Oklahoma. And he's like, no AC? What? And hey, Margie. All right, I got to go. Let me edit this thing up. I'll see you later.